Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Kenny Ames, and I have the great honor of being able to introduce my very good friend, Mark Levine, who I met on our very first day working together in Barney's office. And I come into the office, and the first person I met was Mark Levine. Now, I grew up in Barney's district and had admired him forever, so I was a little bit nervous that day. And Mark just saunters up. I've never seen anybody so happy to start work. And over the years, as I got to know Mark better, I understood why he was so excited to go and work for Barney, for what he stood for progressive values, for women's rights, for labor rights, and for civil rights. And that was one of the best things that I got to know about Mark, was his passion. And seeing him here and all of you as he's getting ready to run for Congress as we turn in the petitions tomorrow.
That's right.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is, "Great moments are born out of great opportunity." And that's from Herb Brooks, giving it to the USA hockey team before they beat Russia. But I think that quote is very appropriate, because what we have here, what we have earned, is a great opportunity to put the aggressive progressive in Congress, to give a voice to people who aren't often heard, and to be able to hold those accountable for what they say. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to introduce my good friend and candidate, Mark Levine.
This is great. This is great. Seeing all of you here, all the support, it's wonderful. So I think those of you who know me, and maybe even some of you who don't know me that well, know that I'm not really a quiet person. You may like a quiet person, maybe as your spouse or something like that, but I don't think we need quiet people in Congress. I think all too often the Democrats just go along and take what they can get and maybe cast a vote, but aren't out there changing the course of the debate. So one of the things I'm doing in that room, if you can hear it over the noise, everyone, and if not, we can find it on YouTube, is I'm showing some of the times where I've changed the course of the debate. And, I'm very famous for taking out my Constitution and reminding Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly of some of the parts in it that they don't really want to talk about very much. And one of the things I've done in my radio show for the last 10 years is change people's minds. And I don't give up on people. I've had Tea Party people call into my show, and they start out, Obama's terrible, Obama's Hitler, and we just start walking through it. So you say Obama's Hitler, you mean he's killed millions of people? Well, no, I don't mean. And suddenly we've walked through, and I say things like, so you really think that poor people deserve to die? No, of course not. I don't think. So you think they should have health care too? Well, yeah, I mean, it's not. And suddenly, it takes 45 minutes sometimes. But you can do that on the radio. We have had on-air conversions, and I'm very proud of that. One of the things that I find is that a lot of the way they talk is in spin bites. They have their lines. And you go underneath their lines, and they got nothing for it. You simply say to them, do you believe that we are our brother's keeper? Do you believe that we're all here to take care of each other? I remind a lot of these people that we're all born helpless, and we die helpless. And it's only that part in the middle where you have people taking care of each other that lets us live from day to day. And so what can we do? And it's a moral belief. It's the heart of where I come from. I think it's the heart of where all of you come from. That we have to make a difference. That we have to make other people's lives better. Because let's face it, we didn't come here alone. Everyone else helped us. Whether it was our parents or my parents are here, by the way. My mom is here. My dad is there. They came all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. And I obviously wouldn't be where I am today, even close, without my parents and without my entire family, without my friends, without my country, which prepared the way for me. And for generations, our country has been the American dream, right? People come from all over the world, immigrants from all over the world. My great-grandfather came to this country, and I got the Ellis Island Manifest from my mom, and he had $20. His total net worth was $20. And he was a peddler in southern Mississippi and New Orleans, and he got enough, he would sew women's dresses from some scraps he found, and he got enough to afford to buy a horse. By the time he died, he had 6 stores. This is the American dream. And the American dream in every generation, we all know it's true, generation after generation, we know that each generation does better than the next. until, I'm sorry to say, this generation. I really feel for you millennials out there. This may be the first generation in all of American history where kids are not doing better than their parents. And that is the antithesis of everything America is about. America is about each generation doing better. And one of the main things, one of my big issues, as most of you know if you've seen me march in the parade, or some of you who've joined me from marching in the parades, is to make college affordable again. Because kids are coming home after college and they're drowning in debt. Tens of thousands, sometimes $100,000 in debt. And the reason is actually quite simple. The federal government every year has been lowering the amount of money they give for colleges, and colleges have been jacking up their rates through the roof, way higher than inflation. And I saw another candidate, I won't mention his name, but I saw another candidate talk about this on Facebook and say, it's too bad there's nothing we can do. He actually said that on Facebook. It's too bad there's nothing we can do. And I said, what do you mean there's nothing we can do? There's actually a fairly simple solution. I'm the only candidate that's proposed it. I welcome the other candidates if they want to join me. It's very simple. Right now, colleges, the more they charge, the more federal money they get, because they look at the difference between what the student can pay and what the college costs. I would reverse that. I would say federal money, that's very important for colleges. They really need federal money. I'd say public universities, if you want federal money, the more you lower your prices, the more money you get. If you will promise to cap your price at the rate of inflation, we will give you a lot of federal money. If you will not do that, then sorry, you can raise whatever prices you want, but you're not going to get federal aid. This would cause a race down in prices rather than a race up in prices. And because 3/4 of kids go to public universities, the 1/4 that go to private universities, those private universities are going to have to compete with the public option. And suddenly we're going to see spiraling downward rather than spiraling upward. It is offensive that they make $58 billion a year, the federal government, off of our students who are just trying to achieve the American dream. And we have to stop that. So that's one of my big proposals. So when people ask what the aggressive progressive is, it's the guy that doesn't just sort of say, all right, whatever the Democrats want, I'm going to vote for. I'm to the left of the Democrats. And I defend that because President Obama has said he wants us to challenge him from the left. Clearest example, universal care. The best health care in the world is not in the United States. It's in the 35 nations who have universal care. And if you go to Canada or England or France or Italy or Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and you get sick, you see a doctor and you are treated. And then you go home and you don't have to worry about the bills because it's all covered. And here's the really great part. Not only do they pay half of what we pay, and sometimes less than half, but they all live longer than we do. Even in tiny Costa Rica, which is not near as rich as the United States, they have universal care, and Costa Ricans live longer than Americans. This is not an attack on Costa Rica. It's a question of, I think we can do better. Absolutely, we can do better. So what happened with universal care, right? That is the gold standard. That is the standard that all these other nations have. Well, we didn't even hear about that. We didn't hear about Medicare for all. We heard, well, maybe President Obama will sort the public option, and then he sort of threw that away. And now the Affordable Care Act, which is better than the status quo before, that's seen as this far left position. Well, the Affordable Care Act was started by Republicans. It was started by the Heritage Foundation, okay? So it's better than the current system, but it's nowhere near as good as Medicare for all. And that's what I say. You know, the easiest way to fix health care, you don't need a 2,000-page bill. All you do is you go to the Medicare bill and you scratch out where it says 65. And suddenly everyone gets Medicare. And the nice thing about that system, first of all, people on Medicare, polls have shown more than 90% of people on Medicare like their Medicare. So we don't have complaints from people who are on Medicare. But because people in their 50s, 40s, 30s, and 20s are less likely to get sick, though they can, than someone in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, if they're paying premiums into Medicare and less likely to take money out, suddenly Medicare becomes solvent and everyone's covered. It's a simple solution, but it would work, and we know it works because it works in Canada. And Canada's not that different from the rest of us. So on all these issues, on guns, every time I turn on the television and I see some mentally ill young man has found it really easy to get a gun and shoot up a mall, and I read the statistics, 90% of Democrats want background checks, 80% of Republicans want background checks. The majority of gun owners want background checks, and then I hear Democrats saying, oh, we can't win on guns. Who are they talking to? The American people want background checks on guns. I don't care how much the NRA gives. You know, we just elected Terry McAuliffe. He had a 0 rating with the NRA. I will proudly have a 0 rating from the National Rifle Association. Proudly. So on all manner of issues. Other Democrats talk about preserving Social Security. That's good. we can do better. If we lift the cap and make millionaires and billionaires pay the same rate that everyone else pays, we can expand Social Security and make sure that everyone who works in this country full-time doesn't live in poverty. These are dreams that we can have. It's all part of the American dream. But you need someone willing to say these things publicly. So I want to have time to mill around and talk with all of you. A few things you should know about me if you don't already. So most of you know I was legislative counsel, top lawyer to Congressman Barney Frank. And in fact, Kenny worked with me for Barney. Peter Kovar was Barney's chief of staff back there. Maria and Joe had to leave. Barney was the original aggressive progressive. No one could doubt that Barney Frank was either aggressive or progressive. But he was also effective. Barney Frank did a lot of things behind the scenes that people don't even know about. And I know because I helped him do some of those things. Let me give you an example that we've never told anyone. Here's news made tonight for you, Lou, in the Washington Blade. When the victims of September 11th were murdered, there was a proposal to pay the victims. It was the Victims' Compensation Fund. At the time, there was no rights for gay couples at all. And the Bush administration was pushed by Barney Frank to give rights to gay couples too. Well, they didn't have any rights because they weren't legally married. The Bush administration did not want their right wing to know they were helping gay couples, but they also knew that if they didn't, Barney would get angry, he'd go public, he'd be an aggressive progressive, and suddenly gay couples wouldn't get compensated, and there's a lot of sympathy for September 11th victims. So we worked behind the scenes. We worked with Ken Feinberg, the master. We worked with the Bush administration, and we made a deal. As long as every gay couple gets the same benefits that straight couples get, we won't let anyone know the Bush administration is secretly helping gay couples. Because the goal was to help people, not to get publicity. This story has never been told. It's one of the many things I did behind the scenes that Barney Frank did behind the scenes. I'll tell you another one I did behind the scenes. Again, a story that's never been told. George Bush had a faith-based initiative. Some of you know what that was. It was to allow government jobs to discriminate on the basis of religion. And I don't have to tell you, if you discriminate on the basis of religion, it doesn't just make a baby cry. What it does is, it's a discrimination on the basis of race and sexual orientation. Let's face it, Martin Luther King said that the most segregated hour in America is 11 a.m. on Sundays. There's black churches, there's white churches, there's Asian churches. If you only give to one church, you can discriminate on the basis of everything, race, religion, sexual orientation. Well, this was a bill that was originally supported by Senator Joe Lieberman. And back in 2002, he was still a hero in the Democratic Party because he had just been vice president, not so much anymore. He got 60 senators to sign on to this bill, including Senator Hillary Clinton. And they were all on board, and Bush told them it won't allow for discrimination. Well, Barney Frank set me up. He said, I'm his chief lawyer. I wrote a brief. I showed how basically the Bush administration, through executive orders, could drive a huge discriminatory hole through that law. And in fact, they'd done it in the past. I drafted this legal brief, and Barney sent me out to go talk to a number of senators. Well, I remember I talked to one senator. I guess I won't give her name out publicly. She wasn't interested. She wasn't going to do it. And then I started talking to Senator Hillary Clinton. And Senator Clinton, to her credit, and she had endorsed this bill, and her political people were telling her, you can't back away from an endorsement, it doesn't look good. Senator Clinton read my memo. She pointed out a footnote to me on page 11 and said, now, does this really mean this? We had a great discussion. If you ever want to know if Senator Clinton is a really brilliant, wonky person, let me tell you about this. We sat, we talked, she and I, there were aides in the room, and she said to me after reading my memo, she said, Mark, if you're right about this, and we're going to check, and she looked me right in the eye, she said, we're going to check to make sure you're right about this. If you're right about this, I will withdraw my support for the bill, and I'm going to urge everyone else to do the same. They checked up on me. My legal brief was sound. Everything I wrote was solid. She not only changed her vote, but she convinced 13 senators, including the one I had tried to convince earlier, to change their votes. We killed George Bush's faith-based initiative. My conversation with Hillary Clinton. So, a lot of people don't know this background stuff. They know me on TV, and that's fun, and you can watch me in the other room and see me battle with Bill O'Reilly, and I love that because their arguments are frankly, they're not that deep, okay? There's a lot of spin bites, and I like to definitely, puncture the balloons of the right wing. I do enjoy that. And I think that's important. You do it very well. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's very important. But what you need to know about me, if you don't know already, is I've been a citizen activist for 20 years. 20 years ago, and actually my parents helped me do this. Remember when we did this, Mom? We went and we did a march on Hollywood because 20 years ago there were no positive gay characters anywhere in Hollywood. And we did a march on Hollywood, and my parents joined me because that's the kind of great parents that they are. And we convinced some Hollywood execs they need to have, we said, they have positive African-American characters, and that's doing well for them. Why don't they have positive gay characters? And I'm not saying we did it alone, but Will and Grace came out about a year and a half after that. I wrote the second marriage equality bill in the nation in California at a time when gay groups thought full equality was too much to ask for. Many of you know in 1996, I don't know if well, that's okay. I'll talk about it. So in 1996, I guess I might as well say it here as well as anywhere. 1996, my sister was murdered. She was murdered by her husband. And it was a horrific thing for all of us. And as horrible as that was, I decided to use that to help other people. And I wrote a law in the state of Tennessee to protect victims of domestic violence and their children. And it passed unanimously. All Democrats and all Republicans supported that bill. I wasn't in the legislature. I wrote the law, and I argued it, and that is the law in Tennessee today, and it's the kind of law I'd like to see across the country. I've also done a lot of work. Many of you asked me about that sign over there, say no to institutional child abuse. This has been something I fought since 2005. Kids all across the country are being put in these reform schools or boot camps or wilderness camps, and a lot of people don't even know this is happening. And they're put there, they've never committed a crime, and they're put behind barbed wires, teenagers, where a lot of times they're brutally treated. And in fact, a lot of young girls are raped and abused. And they call 911 and they send them back to their places because they have no rights as kids. And George Miller and I drafted a law together to help fix these things. George Miller of California, he's retiring this year. One of the first things that I will do in Congress is to pass a law to shut down these places. And that law that we tried to get before. So I've had a lot of issues over the years. Many of you know I wrote the legal brief challenging the Florida electors because I think the American people should choose the president, not the United States Supreme Court. Woo-hoo. I know. It seems radical, doesn't it? Seems radical. But yeah, all I've done as a citizen, I actually think I can be a lot more effective as a member of Congress because I can go, I can make the argument. If they make silly arguments, we'll beat them. If they'll be reasonable, we'll work with them. But at the end of the day, we need to take back this Congress for the citizens of America and not let them get by with their facile rhetoric. Because when they set the terms of the debate, we all lose. We all lose. We have to reframe the debate. So if you believe in what I'm saying and you want to go out there and support this cause, because this should be a movement. This is not about me. This is about taking back this country, aggressively fighting for progressive values. And it's the kind of thing where if we do it, Barney Frank, great guy, retired, wonderful, and he deserves to retire. He deserves to have a happy life. But who's going to fill his shoes? Who's going to come after Jim Moran, who worked so hard for progressive values? Who's going to come after Gary Ackerman? I can name a whole host of George Miller, Henry Waxman. They're all leaving Congress. And we're going to leave Congress to the Tea Party and a bunch of Democrats who just sort of say, all right, well, they're shutting down the government. We'll give them whatever they want. I don't think so. I think you want an aggressive progressive to stand up for the values that we all believe in. And I hope that you'll elect me as that aggressive progressive member of Congress. Sure, I'll be happy to take questions. Other people have questions?
I don't know.
My mom wants to know if anyone has any questions. I'd be happy to take some.
Are corporations people?
They are not. And in fact, I will prove it to you.
Not a plant.
No. I'm going to prove it to you. So I've been asked this question before. And there's actually a very simple answer, and it's right here in the 14th Amendment. Okay? So the 14th Amendment describes who has rights in America. And it says very, very clearly that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States, and those are the things that have privilege. Okay, so by the way, that's why fetuses, sorry, they're not in the 14th Amendment. They're not born or naturalized, all right? We can have rights for them, we can give them rights, but they're not in the Constitution. Corporations are not born, and they're not naturalized. They do not have any rights under this document. Corporations are what we call legal fictions. The government creates them, and they are created by the government, by the way. Every corporation is a Delaware or Virginia or something corporation. They're created by the government to serve specific purposes. When they cease to serve those purposes, the government should take their rights away because they are creatures of the government. And when you in West Virginia, for example, Freedom Industries, can pour out all these pollutants into the water so that 300,000 people can't drink, and then they declare bankruptcy and say, nope, limited liability, I say something, if you executives knew that you weren't doing inspections on those tanks, and you knew that it could poison 300,000 people, those executives need to pay. We need to pierce the corporate veil because they don't have any rights under this document. And anyone that would knowingly poison 300,000 people should either pay for it or go to jail or maybe both. I think we could do both. So thank you for that question. I appreciate that.
I've got to find the video where you were shaking your Constitution and at a Republican and it slipped out of your fingers and bounced off his forehead.
Yes. That is true.
Twice.
Shake that Constitution.
That is true. That is true. Yes.
The Republicans have just launched, was it their 50th attempt to repeal Obamacare?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? What would you
Well, you know, one of the things I would do is I would start talking about universal care. You know, I wouldn't give in to this idea of the Affordable Care Act, you know, that's the great socialist dream. It's a step forward. Ooh, you okay? Sorry about that.
Good catch.
Very good. It's a step forward, to be sure. It's a step forward. I mean, I talked to the guy in Kentucky who just called me on the radio show who got health care for the first time in his life. 48-year-old guy, he strips tobacco. And he had a hernia, couldn't see a doctor because he wasn't allowed under Medicaid. They didn't provide for him. So it's good, but it's just a step. It's not everything. Let's start talking about Canada and all these silly stories. Oh, you have to wait in line. There's a woman in this room. I don't know if she wants to say her name, so I won't. If she wants to out herself, she can. But there's a woman in this room who has a hip issue, and she's born with it. And it's a very painful thing. The cartilage is gone. And she had to take a job that she didn't like, that she didn't want to take, wasn't her dream, just so she could get the health care to get her hip fixed. And she had to work at this job for more than a year. This is a close friend of mine. Work at her job for more than a year just to get her hip fixed. Now, the conservatives complain that some people in Canada have to wait 6 weeks to get their hip fixed. Well, my friend had to wait for more than a year. You know? Their system is so much better than ours, and the English and the French. So I would start talking about universal care. Another thing I would do, Sarah, is I would talk about, do people like their Medicare? Because I've never met anyone that didn't like their Medicare. You know, it can always be improved. Everything can be improved. But I'd say, if they like it so much and it works so much, wouldn't you like to have Medicare too? You who's 50, you who's 40, 30, 20? I'd like to have Medicare. I'd love it. It works well for so many Americans. So I would bring the debate to the progressive gold standard. And then if they want to talk about the Affordable Care Act, that's fine. We can talk about how the Affordable Care Act is better than the status quo, but not. I'll tell you something else the universal care does that even Republicans like. Right now, it's tied, like my friend, it's tied to your job. So employees don't like that, and employers don't like that because they don't want to have to choose, oh, well, this employee A is not as good as employee B, but A is healthy and B is a little sick, and so I have to hire the least qualified person because they're healthy. Businesses shouldn't decide who they're going to hire based on whether someone needs diabetic care or not. That doesn't make any sense. So we just divorce it from jobs entirely, the way they do it in every country in Europe and Japan and Australia and New Zealand. So I would grab the debate from Affordable Care Act or not, and let's start debating on whether universal care is a good idea. So thank you for that question. Yes?
Well, I have to say that for more than 5 years, I don't have health insurance.
Sorry.
I cannot afford it. I was in Brazil, my land, and I twisted my foot. And the healthcare in Brazil is really in shambles right now. But yet, I went to the emergency, and I had my foot fixed. Everything done. And they did not ask me for a penny.
They charged you zero. That's right.
And before that, I was a tour guide in Brazil, and one of the people I was working with hit their head. I took to the emergency, and they say, where should I pay? Where should I pay? I said, no, you don't. There's emergency, and paid nothing.
We are the richest nation on earth per capita. We can do at least as well as Brazil. That's not an attack on Brazil. It's an attack on us. We need to do better. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, do you have a solution or a plan or an idea for raising the income levels of middle-class workers in your
Yes.
country?
Yes, I do. Number of things. First of all, we need to raise minimum wage. That's just an easy one. $10.10 gets us back to about where we were in the 1960s. That's not even a raise. It's just keeping it the same after inflation for what we had in the 1960s. And we need to index the minimum wage, so we don't have to raise it every few years. It should just go up automatically. That's minimum. And the other candidates have talked about that as well. But I would do more than that. It seems to me that part of what the American dream is all about is that if you work full-time, you shouldn't be living in poverty. If you work a full-time job, you should be able to do that. Now, one of the ways we do that, frankly, is unions. Unions, when people attack unions, I say, I guess you don't like weekends. Because the unions gave us the weekend. Unions gave us overtime. When Republicans, on TV, they're like, we hate unions. Unions are bad. I was like, oh, really? You disagree with time and a half? You disagree with weekends? You disagree with ending child labor? Because apparently they do. This is what unions do. And unions are being attacked mercilessly. We know that's probably the biggest front right now. Unions used to represent 25, 30% of American workers. Now it's down to 7%. And unions are the great way that we've had people rise out of poverty and get better wages. So I think that we have that. I think we lower college costs. I think we raise the minimum wage. And I am not afraid to say that if millionaires pay the same rate as everyone else on Social Security, then we can get a lot more money in the system as well. So all these things you can do. One more thing. I talked about this on air, and I had a woman, I forget who it was one of the Fox women, deny that this exists. It's a basic economic concept. It's a little complicated. It's called the multiplier effect. It's not that complicated. Basically, it works like this. If a kid doesn't have loans from college and can actually, I say a kid, so I'm talking about someone who's 22, 25, not really a kid, a new college graduate can get out there and buy a home and buy a car and buy furniture because they don't have all these loans, then someone has to make more cars. Someone has to make more furniture. They have to hire more workers, and then those people go out and they buy more furniture, or they go out on a trip, or they'll go out and buy more toys for their kids at Christmas time. All right? Then the toy manufacturers and the people that send people on vacations, they get more money coming in, and it multiplies. So when you help middle-class people and working-class people do better, it helps the whole country do better. If Ebenezer Scrooge keeps every one of his gold pieces, and you give him another 1,000,000 gold pieces, he's just going to sit it up on his desk. But when Tiny Tim gets health care and can walk again, and can go out and maybe find the cure for cancer, he can not only help Ebenezer Scrooge in his old age, but he can help the entire economy, because when poor middle-class people get more money, they spend it because they need it. When rich people get more money, they just stick it in the bank, and it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the economy grow. So you had a question.
Levine for Congress.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I
Good.
understood you to say that the federal government makes lots of money on
Student
college
loans.
tuition.
Right. Student loans. So the student
How
loans,
do they make the money on?
student loans are charged at about 6% today. Okay? The actual cost of the federal government, what we loan to banks, is about 0.5%. So that 5.5% difference turns out to be about $58 billion a year. Billion. Not million, billion.
And what
Elizabeth
does
Warren
the
has talked
government
about
do
that.
with it? Are
They keep it.
obligated to put it back into the
No, they agribusinesses and corporate welfare and hedge funds and all the other things that government spends on. They make a profit off our students. They didn't used to do that before. It's a problem. Elizabeth Warren talks about that. Just goes right to the general fund. That's exactly right.
So Mark will be here all.
Yeah, you can ask me more questions.
As will I.
Showing it down.
Well, John, if you haven't met him yet, the campaign.
My campaign manager,
Please
John
introduce
Devine, right there.
yourselves.
And Cynthia, where's she? Is she outside?
Cynthia's probably not
Or still outside? She's my field director. Out in the field.
So we will be here. Thank you so much for supporting Mark. Again, I am
Appreciate that.
far more shameless than he is. So I will stop you at the door and ask you to empty your pockets.
Or if you've
Or
got
just have to
friends.
talk to you about politics.
If you've got friends, maybe you can't empty your pockets, but you have friends who might be willing to support me. You can have a little gathering at your house. I'll be happy to speak there. I won't have to speak this long if you don't want me to. I can speak on any issue you care about. We didn't even talk about immigration or a woman's right to choose or all the other things that.
The next house
Just
party.
come
Drug
speak to him
legalization.
personally, please.
So yeah, come see Rebecca and let her know. Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.
Thanks.